A Leviticus reading. Today is April 15th. Our reading from Leviticus is chapter 15. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Speak to the Israelite people and say to them, when any man has a discharge issuing from his member, he is unclean. The uncleanliness from his discharge shall mean the following: whether his member runs with the discharge or is stopped up so that there is no discharge, his uncleanliness means this: any bedding on which the one with the discharge lies shall be unclean, and every object on which he sits shall be unclean. Anyone who touches his bedding shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. Whoever sits on an object on which the one with the discharge has sat shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. Whoever touches the body of one with the discharge shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. If one with a discharge spits on one who is clean, the latter shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. Any means for riding that one with a discharge has mounted shall be unclean. Whoever touches anything that was under him shall be unclean until evening, and whoever carries such things shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. If one with a discharge, without having rinsed his hands in water, touches another person, that person shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. An earthen vessel that one with a discharge touches shall be broken, and any wooden implement shall be rinsed with water. When one with a discharge becomes clean of his discharge, he shall count off 7 days for his cleansing, wash his clothes, and bathe his body in fresh water. Then he shall be clean. On the 8th day he shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, and come before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and give them to the priest. The priest shall offer them, the one as a sin offering and the other as a burnt offering. Thus the priest shall make expiation on his behalf for his discharge before the Lord. When a man has an emission of semen, he shall bathe his whole body in water and remain unclean until evening. All cloth or leather on which semen falls shall be washed in water and remain unclean until evening. And if a man has carnal relations with a woman, they shall bathe in water and remain unclean until evening. When a woman has a discharge, her discharge being blood from her body, so shall remain in her impurity 7 days. Whoever touches her shall be unclean until evening. Anything that she lies on during her impurity shall be unclean, and anything that she sits on shall be unclean. Anyone who touches her bedding shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. And anyone who touches any object on which she sat shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. Be it the bedding or be it the object on which she has sat, on touching it he shall be unclean until evening. And if a man lies with her, her impurity is communicated to him. He shall be unclean 7 days, and any bedding on which he lies shall become unclean. When a woman has had a discharge of blood for many days, not at the time of her impurity, or when she has a discharge beyond her period of impurity, she shall be unclean as though at the time of her impurity, as long as her discharge lasts. Any bedding on which she lies while her discharge lasts shall be for her like bedding during her impurity, and any object on which she sits shall become unclean as it does during her impurity. Whoever touches them shall be unclean. He shall wash his clothes, bathe in water, and remain unclean until evening. When she becomes clean of her discharge, she shall count off 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. On the 8th day she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, and bring them to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest shall offer the one as a sin offering, and the other as a burnt offering, and the priest shall make expiation on her behalf for her unclean discharge before the Lord. You shall put the Israelites on guard against their uncleanliness, lest they die through their uncleanliness by defiling my tabernacle which is among them. Such is the ritual concerning him who has a discharge, concerning him who has an emission of semen and becomes unclean thereby, and concerning her who is in menstrual infirmity, and concerning anyone, male or female, who has a discharge, and concerning a man who lies with an unclean woman.